DND number 9, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Chapter 22. It's May 10th, Friday evening, Pine Forest High School, Pine Forest, Georgia. They had already had a prayer and pep talk in the locker room since it was a home game. And they just finished stretching and warming up and were back in the dugout getting ready for the opening ceremony. Gabe looked around. He could see his parents, his sisters, the Apples and Stewarts. Ricky Keno, son Eric, Jojo, and Logan had arrived, and they sat in front of his parents with Bree and Taylor. The weird thing was, it was happening again. People everywhere. He leaned over and spoke to Peyton. Look at all the freaking people. What is happening? I thought all this stuff had gone away. Peyton frowned and looked down at the ground and kicked at the dirt. Gabe narrowed his eyes at his friend. What did you do? Peyton grimaced. Sorry, Gabe. Right after you were taken, that Isla lady got in touch with me because someone told her you and I were best friends. And so she called me the other day for an update on you because she heard you went back to the hospital. And I told her about us seniors trying to get you to at least come practice with us. And then she called me back yesterday, and I told her you were going to get to play. I am? How do you know? Coach told me. Gabe blew out a breath. Okay, but Peyton, can you please just keep your mouth shut about me? Sorry, dude, I'm no good at keeping secrets. And like now, Coach is going to be pissed that I let you know you're going to play before he told you. Gabe shook his head. Okay, I'll try not to let on that I know. Peyton nodded but didn't smile. Gabe's eyebrows rose. What else? What else are you not telling me? Well, I may have let it slip to the Isla lady that Taylor Keno is coming to the prom with you, and also that she'll be at the game tonight. Good grief, he sighed and turned away. Are you pissed at me, man? I'm trying not to be. Look, I'm sorry. Is it going to mess you up with Taylor? Probably not. She's used to the publicity. Well, then, good. But, bro, you'd better get used to it, too, 'cause this is just the beginning. Gabe nodded. Yep, you're right. Just do me a favor and try to not talk about me to anyone with a camera, phone, or mic pointed at you. Okay? I'll try. All right, guys, listen up, Coach Wilson said. We have 5 games left. 2 tonight, 1 Tuesday, and 2 next Friday. And in light of what's taken place, Gabe, you start tonight. It may only be for a few innings. We'll see how you feel. Got it? Gabe smiled and nodded. Yes, sir, Coach. Thank you, sir. Out in the stands, Taylor, young Eric, Ricky, and Bree signed a few autographs. Taylor kept looking up, trying to see Gabe peek out of the dugout. And when they started introducing the teams, Ricky nodded at Agent Dalton, who then kindly leaned down and told the group that there would be no more autographs during the game. But they would be happy to sign after the game, for a short time. When Gabe's name was called, a giant cheer went up as the crowd welcomed him back. Taylor's face glowed as she watched her guy trot out, hit hands with the team, and take his place along the first baseline. He turned and smiled at her. She was wearing her Team Gabe shirt from the mini-mart. She blew him a kiss. He grinned and pointed at her, and then he tipped his hat at his father and at Ricky. Gabe turned back around to take in and memorize everything he could about standing on the field with his team before a game. Elias, left fielder, looking fierce as usual. Liam, the catcher, always calm. Luke, first baseman, smiling as usual. Carlos, tonight's starting pitcher, kicking at the dirt. Peyton, center fielder, jumping up and down to loosen up. Dion, the third baseman, rolling his shoulders. Second baseman Andre chatting with right field Drake. He watched the military vets come to the pitcher's mound. He watched to see all the teams and people in the stands remove their hats and place them over their hearts. Everyone turned to face the flag, the symbol of his country that so many men and women had died for. He felt the familiar emotions. Maybe that is what he needed to do. Join the military. Fight for his country. His mother and sisters would freak. Maybe his father, too. The anthem ended, and the crowd roared, and Gabe went about his business of revving up his team. They took the field and warmed up, threw the ball around the horn, and the ump yelled, "Play ball." After the fourth inning, Gabe sat on the bench. It was fair that he only played 4 innings. He was tired. Kyle went into right field, and everyone shifted, and Carlos was pitching a heck of a game. So far, only a single hitter. Gabe had not done badly at all. He made a couple of great plays at short. His first at-bat was a line drive single, which he stretched into a double. And when he flew past first and everyone realized he was going for two, the crowd went crazy. He was happy to feel like he was almost back to normal. His second at-bat, he hit a little dribbler to third, but beat it out. Both times he scored. Now he cheered for his teammates, calling encouragements. When the first game ended, he came to the fence and motioned at Taylor, and she glanced at her dad, and he nodded. She went to join him at the fence. "Hey," he said, his body pressed against the fence, his hands gripping the chain link on either side of her head. She smiled. "Hey, how am I doing?" "I think you're wonderful." "I think you're beautiful with your ponytail coming out the back of your cap." "Where did you get a Pine Forest High School rebel cap?" She giggled. I bought it off some guy." He laughed. "Well, I'd better go. Would it be too much to ask for a little kiss right here at the fence with probably everyone looking on?" She lifted her chin, placed her mouth in the center of one of the links. He bent down and quickly kissed her. He backed away, grinning, his hand on his heart. The crowd was cheering, and he took his hat off and waved, and they went wild. Taylor turned and glanced up at her parents, who weren't smiling. She went back to sit, and Ricky leaned toward her. "You realize that is going to make more than social media. It's going to be on the news, main networks, and probably most sports channels." She shrugged. "Well, it was worth it." New scene. May 11th, Saturday morning. Pine Forest Country Inn, Pine Forest, Georgia. Taylor sat in the living room/lobby area of the inn. Her brother and cousin sat next to her. They were scrolling and making comments on all the excitement from last night's game. Sure enough, the tiny kiss Taylor and Gabe had shared was everywhere. Close-ups, their hands touching, their lips touching, Gabe smiling with his hand on his heart. There were other pics and videos, too. Gabe sliding into second, Gabe sliding into home, Gabe running, Gabe batting, Gabe scooping up a hard grounder and firing it to first. He'd gone viral again. It was Saturday morning, and he was still trending. There were even memes and comments speculating on the relationship between Gabe and Taylor. Some about Taylor being with him because of his social media status. Some about him being with her because of her name. Young Eric had already advised her to not read the comments. She usually did not pay attention to that sort of stuff, but a few of the ones she glanced at were pretty hurtful. Still, the majority of them were positive and encouraging, calling them Hollywood's youngest power couple. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. "Can you meet me in the inn's kitchen in 10 minutes? It was from Gabe. She smiled and texted back, "See you then," heart emoji. Eric nodded at her. "Just a warning, little sister. If he wants to take you somewhere, check with Mom or Dad first. I don't want you to mess up and get grounded." She smiled and kissed her brother's cheek. She ran upstairs, checked her hair, added a splash of body spray, and headed back down. Gabe came into the inn through the back door. The kitchen crew working turned and greeted him. Some congratulated him on the games last night, both of which they won. He knew the kitchen crew well because he'd spent many summers working in this kitchen. He chatted with them until Taylor entered the room. Then he lost all thought. She approached, and he took her hand, drew her over toward the back door, turned and kissed her. They stood face to face, forehead to forehead. "You smell good," he said. "Thanks. Did I tell you last night how awesome you were?" "About 100 times. Listen, I just needed to see you. I couldn't wait until tonight. The thought of you being right next door and not all the way across the country, I had to take advantage of that." "Well, I'm glad you did. I just want to make sure the time hasn't changed. You'll be here at the inn at 5 to pick me up, right?" "Yeah, a little earlier, actually, because I was told to make time for pictures. And Peyton and Avery are going to meet us here and ride in the limo. And the dinner reservations are at 5:30 at a place in Griffin called Angelita's, which is about 25 miles away." "Ooh, a limo. How fancy." He smiled. "You don't have to act impressed for me. I know you're used to much fancier stuff." I mean, Angelita's is about the fanciest restaurant around here without having to travel all the way into Macon or Atlanta. A lot of the kids go there on big dates, and I know some schools have their proms at fancy hotels or ballrooms, but our little school decorates the gym. I kind of like it that way. Better memories of the school. She nodded. Gabe, I may be used to fancy stuff, but I'm not a snob. I only remarked about the limo because I didn't expect it. Did you think I'd take you to prom in my pickup? Well, I wouldn't mind if you did, but no, I figured we'd be riding in an Ameritech SUV driven by an agent. Oh, well, you got that last part right. She giggled, a sound he loved. So, can you go for a walk with me if we stay on the inn property? Let me see. She texted her mom real quick. She frowned. She says, where on the property? Gabe shrugged. How about down past the pecan grove? I could show you the creek. My mom says okay, and I have 1 hour, then I have to start getting ready. You're kidding. How long does it take you to get ready? Well, she'll insist I have some lunch and a nap, and my hair is so long it takes it a while to dry after my shower, and there's a lot of stuff to do. He nodded. Okay, we have an hour. Let's go. He took her hand and headed out the back door and across the large lawn toward the pecan trees. As they did, they heard gunshots, and Taylor froze. Gabe smiled at her and tugged on her hand. That's your brother and cousins and Jake and Bugs getting in some long-range shooting. Oh, I wonder why they didn't invite us. Gabe frowned. Sorry, they did, but I told them we had other plans. Guess I should have consulted you. She smiled up at him. Well, what exactly do you have planned? Just being alone with you for just a little while. We always have someone watching us or with us. I just wanted some time alone. If you'd rather shoot, I can grab my guns and we'll head over there. No, I'd rather be alone with you. He smiled. Good. They walked slowly, talking about the game, about the prom, and about Gabe's plans for after graduation. And as they started into the woods that led to the creek, she asked him if he figured out what he wanted to do yet. He sighed. Well, I've toyed with the idea to go the military route. He glanced down at her to see if she had anything to say about that, but the only thing he saw was a slight frown. If I'd like to go warrior mode, but not join the military, I could apply to try to be one of Jason's elite. He sighed and shrugged. Or I could go to college and get a business degree or a degree in nonprofit management or even criminal justice, something that would allow me to work with my own foundation and do some kind of good in the world. Taylor nodded. What school would you go to? Well, I've been accepted at UGA, Alabama, Florida State, Texas, and USC. USC? Really? He smiled at her. Yes, really. I'm considering it. I could go to school, be close to you, and that would be cool, but he hesitated. But I shouldn't really make an important decision about my life based on wanting to be near my girlfriend. She grinned. Your girlfriend, huh? He smiled. I mean, isn't that pretty much what you are? And if not, would you consider accepting the title? Would you accept the title, she began, putting the word title in finger quotes, of being my boyfriend? He stopped as they came to the creek and turned and put his hands on her waist. Sure, in a heartbeat. Well, I would be proud to be your girlfriend. She turned away quickly. He watched as she slipped her sandals off. She was wearing a cute little, he didn't know what it was called. It was a one piece, but not a dress. It was like overalls, except short at like mid-thigh and frilly. It was a soft yellow and utterly feminine. She stepped in the water and squealed at it being so cold. Her long, dark brown hair was in a single braid, and it fell forward over her shoulder as she bent down to study the water flowing over her toes. She was the most lovely thing he'd ever seen. He walked over to a tree and sat down in front of it and used it as a backrest, crossing his legs at the ankles. He could sit there watching her all day. She turned to look at him, smiled sweetly, and his heart began to beat hard in his chest. He crooked a finger at her. She came to him immediately. He expected her to come sit next to him. Instead, she straddled him and sat down on his thighs. He drew a deep breath. She moved forward and offered her mouth for his kiss, and he gave it gladly. She moaned softly in the back of her throat and pulled away. Now I can say this to you in person, Gabriel Tanner. I love you, she murmured as she kissed him again. He drew a breath. And now you can't hang up on me before I say, I think I'm falling in love with you too. You think? Well, I'm just being honest. I know we're young, and I know we barely know each other, but if I were to sit and imagine the perfect girl in looks, in personality, in temperament, in beliefs, in spirit, you would fit that image completely. Oh, wow, that was poetic, he chuckled. Ah, Taylor, how perfect is this moment? You know, when they took me and I came to the realization that I may not live much longer, it made me stop and pay attention to every single moment in life, like right now. The most beautiful girl in the world sitting on my lap, that cool breeze that's blowing a few of your hairs that came loose from your braid, the sun shining down between the leaves of the tree, the feel of your lips when they touch mine, the way you smell. I'm trying to commit it all to memory. She leaned down and kissed him again. He groaned and pushed her off his lap onto her back on the soft pallet of leaves and pine straw, leaned over her and took control of the kiss. The feelings were so strong, and he wanted to do much more than kiss her. And when he had that thought, he raised up and pulled away. Wow, she giggled. I agree. Breathing hard, he looked down at her and placed his hand on her abdomen, moved his thumb back and forth. She closed her eyes, and he knew she was waiting for him to continue. He swallowed hard and stood up. She opened her eyes, and he reached his hand down to help her to her feet, and she let him. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take things so far, he mumbled. I could say I accept your apology, but it would be hypocritical because I wanted you to keep going. He closed his eyes and wrapped his arms around her, and they stood together like that for a time. When they had me and I thought I was going to die, I was wishing I'd had the time to know what it was like to have sex. And I was actually given the opportunity. What? He sighed. The woman who took me offered it to me. It seemed kind of like, well, Satan trying to get me to break God's rules right before I died. Were you tempted? He shook his head. No. I was actually worried that she would well, I don't want to talk about that, but no, I didn't want to give in. Let me just say it was a good thing it was her asking and not you, because you, Taylor Keno, are hard to resist. But I want to be strong for you, for my own moral standards, and I guess just so God can smile down on our relationship. Oh, Gabe, those things you say, that's what makes me know that I love you, because I love God and I love Jesus. I love my family and I love you. He took out his phone and checked the time. We'd better head back. We might be a few minutes late. New scene. Gabe and his entire family arrived at the inn. Gabe was holding a box with a corsage in it. He wore a black tux with a crisp white shirt and a gold bow tie. He'd argued about the tie color, but his sisters absolutely insisted. They came in the front door, and Jody and John Apple made a big fuss about how handsome he was. Jake, young Eric, JoJo, and Logan made the appropriate amount of fun of him. Lena kissed his cheek and remarked at how good he smelled, which made everyone laugh. Ricky came over and shook his head. You're looking good there, Gabe. Thank you, sir. And thank you for making this happen. I mean, for bringing Taylor all the way across the country for me. Actually, I did it for her, he said with a chuckle. And because I'd never hear the end of it if I didn't make it happen. Gabe nodded. She can be pretty insistent. Are you speaking about Taylor or my wife? Gabe's mouth fell open, and Ricky laughed. I'm just giving you a hard time, son. We were happy to do this. You're a fine young man, and we couldn't choose anyone more worthy to take our daughter to prom. Gabe swallowed. Thank you, sir. Bree came downstairs and pulled out her phone, and everyone started recording as Taylor came down the staircase. Even the other guests at the inn did the same. Gabe looked up, and his mouth fell open again. Taylor smiled as she started down the stairs. She grabbed the railing. Oh, Lord, don't let me fall, she said, softly, making everyone laugh. She wore a long, form-fitting white and gold gown. The shoulder straps were metallic gold damask lace, which came down at a V to cover the bodice. More gold strands reached down to skim the sides of the dress. Her trim, athletic form was breathtaking. The only jewelry was a delicate gold cross and tiny white pearl earrings. Her shiny long tresses were down, flowing around her face and shoulders and down her back. When she made it to the third from bottom step, Gabe moved forward to take her hand, and she smiled at him. He shook his head. "Taylor, you look amazing." She made it down and stand in front of him and looked up into his eyes. "You clean up real nice, Gabriel Tanner." He grinned. "This is for you." He handed her the white box, and she opened it and took out a lovely white wrist corsage made of white rose petals and, and baby's breath with a gold ribbon. "It's beautiful. How did you know to get white and gold?" she asked. He laughed. "I didn't. I guess my sisters have been in touch with your mom. If not, these flowers would have been much more patriotic." Taylor laughed and looked at everyone. "Private joke," she explained. Taylor looked at her mother and smiled. "Thanks." "You're welcome. I know how you feel about clashing colors." Bree then handed her a small white rose boutonniere, which she then turned and pinned on Gabe's lapel. "There, now we really match." "Stand over here so we can get some pics," Lizzie said. They moved over in front of the window and patiently waited for parents, siblings, and others to get their fill of pics and videos. About that time, Peyton arrived with his girlfriend. Gabe introduced them. "Taylor, you remember Peyton?" Taylor held out her hand. "Of course, Peyton. That homer last night was spectacular." He smiled. "Thanks." Gabe continued. "And this is Avery, Peyton's much better half." Taylor giggled and took Avery's hand. "It's so nice to meet you, Avery. It's so nice to meet you, Avery. I love your dress." "I love yours too," Avery gushed. Ricky and Bree eyed each other. If their daughter knew anything, it was how to handle herself around people. She was a pro. More pics were taken of both couples. Finally, the kids made their way out and down to the limousine after being softly kissed on the cheek by their mothers and Gabriel's hand shaken by both fathers, along with admonishments to behave and have fun. The 4 kids were being escorted and driven by 2 Ameritech agents whose instructions were to be followed to a T, or there would be consequences. New scene. The girls chatted the entire way to the restaurant. Taylor asked how Avery and Peyton met, which led down a winding road. The guys put in their 2 cents worth when they could. At dinner, Taylor talked about the Dodgers game, which perked the guys up. As it turned out, Avery played softball, which intrigued Taylor and led to another delightful conversation. Dinner was lovely. They finally arrived at the school at 7:30, and Taylor was extremely impressed that the prom committee was able to take a high school gym and turn it into an elegant ballroom. The moment they walked in, there was a buzz. Taylor looked around in amazement. The theme was Star Shower, and there were tiny twinkling lights in every place. Ceiling, walls, even circling the floor, white tulle and crystal ornaments like icicles and teardrops hung everywhere. Nowhere could you see the bleachers or concrete block walls. There were high tables graced with white tablecloths, glowing faux candles, and beautiful blue and white floral centerpieces. It was lovely. Taylor was in heaven getting a chance to experience this amazing transformation. She understood what Gabe meant about better school memories. She'd been to so many fancy hotel ballrooms, but none of them could surpass the ambience that she was experiencing right now. People gathered around them, and Gabe did his best to introduce Taylor to everyone. His teammates were easy for her to remember because she was a fan. She tried hard to remember all the other names. And to rescue her, as soon as the DJ played a slow song, Gabe asked Taylor to dance. They made their way onto the dance floor, and he twirled her around and then snaked an arm around her waist and pulled her close. She smiled up at him. "This is so awesome. I am so happy right now." He brushed a soft kiss on her cheek. "It almost feels unreal." "I know, right?" When the kids saw Gabe and Taylor dancing, the dance floor quickly filled up. Gabe looked around him with a smile. "This is cool. It usually takes half the night to get kids out here dancing. It's all you, my amazing girlfriend." She laughed. "I'd say it's all you, the ultimate male." "Please don't say that," he muttered. The music changed, but they remained dancing. He looked up. his mouth falling open as he spotted someone. "What's wrong?" she asked. He took her hand and moved toward the person he spotted. "Isla? What are you doing here? How did you get in?" She laughed. "I spoke to your principal last week. I pulled a few strings. Don't worry, I'm not going to interfere with your special night. But just so you know, we are live right now." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Would you have tried to stop me?" "Maybe. That's why. Hey, I promise we'll talk later. For now, just go about your business like I'm not here. This prom is so charming. I'm loving every bit of it." Taylor pulled on Gabe's hand. "It's okay, Gabe. Get used to it, and don't let it throw you. Come on, dance with me." She pulled him out to the floor, and they danced. And as they did, Taylor nodded at someone behind them on the side of the dance floor. "Look at that guy, Gabe. He's sitting all alone." Gabe glanced behind him. "Oh, that's Steve Williams. He's actually the class treasurer. He's really smart, but socially awkward. He's a nice guy, though. Just like that girl sitting over there." He spun her around so she could see over his shoulder. "That girl in the pink, her name is Tessa. She's so quiet, but she comes to all the games and all the school activities. I don't really know her story." Taylor's eyes lit up. "You absolutely must know what we need to do, right?" "No. What?" "I'll go ask Steve to dance. You go ask Tessa to dance. Then after one song, we'll put them together." I don't know about this." "Why? Are you shy?" "Not really." "Are you scared?" "No," he said quickly. She stepped back. "Well, let's do it." She turned quickly and headed toward Steve. His eyes got big as she neared him. "Hi," she said, holding out her hand. "I'm Taylor." He shook his hand. He shook her hand. "Everyone knows who you are. I'm Steve." "It's nice to meet you, Steve. Come dance with me." She didn't give him time to answer, just pulled him until he stood. She walked out onto the floor beside him. I don't dance." "Nonsense. If you can walk, you can dance." She took his hand, placed it on her back, placed her hand in his other hand. "Now, just move your feet back and forth." "Good. You're doing great." Gabe smiled at beautiful Taylor, so vivacious and full of life. Accepting his fate, he moved toward Tessa, and he smiled at her. "Hey, Tessa. Nice to see you." She actually looked behind her, which made Gabe chuckle. "You know another Tessa around here?" She shook her head. He reached out his hand. "Come on, dance with me." Like Taylor, he didn't give her time to turn him down. He pulled her to her feet and moved out onto the floor. Gently, he put his arm around her waist and swayed back and forth, and he smiled down at her, and she looked up at him with a look of terror. He laughed. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just wanted to dance with you. Is that okay?" She nodded. The music changed then to a quick-paced pop song, and he let go of her and got her to fast dance a little bit. He smiled and nodded. They danced the whole song, and when it went back to a slow number, Taylor was there, handing Steve off to Tessa. "You two have fun," she said. They started dancing with each other, and Taylor and Gabe danced away. But a minute later, Elias was tapping Gabe on the shoulder. Sighing, he backed away and watched his teammate slide a hand around Taylor's waist, and he frowned. Gabe didn't have to go searching for a partner, though. His ex, Trisha, was standing there waiting. "Dance with me," she demanded. He did, and this went on for several songs, both he and Taylor changing out to dance with the next person waiting. And finally, he'd had enough. He made apologies, went and grabbed Taylor from the clutches of her current dance partner, and pulled her away to the refreshment table. They got punch and gulped it down, got another full cup, and sipped. "I was starting to wonder if you were ever going to rescue me," she said. "Hey, this whole dance with someone else deal was your idea." She laughed. "You're right. But just look at them. Don't they look sweet?" He glanced over at Steve and Tessa. "Okay, that's cool." He pulled her close. "So, are you ready to do our thing?" She grinned. "Let's do it." Gabe walked over to the DJ, pulled out his phone, showed him the music. The DJ took the phone and hooked it up to his speakers. Gabe and Taylor headed out to the middle of the dance floor, and the current music stopped. "What's up?" Peyton asked. Gabe smiled. "Watch and learn, buddy." Uptown Funk started, and Taylor began first. Gabe watched her. She looked oh so hot in her tight dress with the split up to mid-thigh. His part came next, and he had most of the popping and the crump, and then they were in sync, dancing what they'd rehearsed perfectly. At one point, when he crouched low in a wide stance and moved his knees in and out, the kids went crazy. And then when Taylor joined him with the same move, the gym exploded. The rest of the dance had lots of hip action. He lifted her, twirled her, set her back down, ran a hand down her side to her thigh where the split in her dress started, pulled her leg up onto his hip and spun her around again and finally ended it. The kids went crazy. The two Ameritech agents looked at each other with a smile. "That's pretty darn good," Agent Crawford said. "Yeah, well, it's also pretty darn, provocative. I'm not sure what Ricky Keno is going to think once he sees the video of this performance." "Well, you know what they say about Gabe." They both nodded and repeated together, "Balls of steel." Gabe retrieved his phone, and he and Taylor went about chatting with Gabe's classmates. Gabe watched Taylor with admiration as she made it a point to speak with the ones who seemed shy. She was doing God's work, being a light. He smiled. As the time went by and the crowd at the dance began to thin, Taylor took Gabe's hand and tugged. "I want two things," she said. He ran a hand over her shoulder. "What's that?" "One more slow dance with you, and then show me your school." He nodded, led her out onto the dance floor, and pulled her close. She laid her head on his chest, and he thought his heart might explode. At this very moment, life was so good. Moving in tandem with Taylor's body, feeling her breath against his neck, getting to know her better and not being disappointed in what he was finding. It was an amazing feeling. It seemed the music ended much too soon. He looked around, nodded toward the rear doors of the gym. "This way." They first stopped to look into the glass cases that held special awards and trophies the school had won over the years. There was baseball, football, swimming, tennis, cheerleading, wrestling, girls volleyball, both boys and girls basketball, softball, and a memoriam for a coach who had died in a car accident. Taylor studied each one. They headed down a long corridor which Gabe told her was the science hall. They turned left to go through the doors that led to the main building, but they were locked. "Oh, well," Gabe said softly, "looks like that's the end of our tour." He took her by the shoulders and gently pushed her up against the wall, lifted her chin and kissed her. He pulled away and shook his head. "Been wanting to do that all night." "Well, then why didn't you?" "I figured you wouldn't like PDAs." "Well, normally no, but with you, anytime, anywhere." He groaned at her words and pressed closer to her and kissed her a long time. She moaned in the back of her throat as he ran his hand down her side, slipped it inside the split in her dress, and grabbed her thigh behind her knee and pulled her leg up to rest on his hip, just like they'd done in their dance. He kissed her cheek, her neck, and then hooked a finger under the shoulder strap of her dress and moved it to kiss her shoulder. Taylor gasped, and he dropped his hand quickly at the clearing of a man's throat. He realized it was one of the Ameritech agents. He sighed and pressed his forehead against hers. "What am I going to do about you, Taylor Keno? You make me forget things I've been taught all my life." She sighed. "I guess we've been taught those things all our lives because when the time came to remember them, it wouldn't be easy." "That is truth, Taylor, because pulling away from you is one of the hardest things I've ever done." He took her hand. "Come on, let's go find Peyton and Avery." He smiled at Agent Dalton as they turned the corner and passed him, giving a small shrug. The prom was winding down. Kids were heading to other parties. Kids were heading to after parties. Gabe and Taylor knew there was no way they'd be allowed to go, but a group of teammates always went to the local DQ after a dance to pig out on blizzards, and when they asked the agents if they would be okay if that would be okay, they were pleasantly surprised. Gabe thought for sure they would lose Peyton and Avery to an after party, but the two had decided to DQ it. The agents parked the limo over on the side of the lot, away from the building, which stood beside the car, arms folded, eyes scanning. Gabe, Peyton, Elias, Lucas, and Liam, and their dates, sat at the outside tables in front. Gabe was having so much fun watching Taylor devour a cookies and cream blizzard, closing her eyes in bliss, moaning and licking the spoon. Everything she did stirred him up. He blew out a calming breath. She'd be leaving tomorrow. He quickly pushed the thought aside. A car rumbled up and some more kids tumbled out. Gabe recognized them from school. He nodded at them, though they weren't really what one would consider friends. The agents didn't like the looks of them and moved in closer. As Peyton headed back to the table with his second blizzard, one of the guys heading in brushed shoulders with him, and he stumbled and dropped his cup of ice cream. "What the hell?" Peyton mumbled. The guy who ran into him shoved him. "You got a problem, Murphy?" the guy asked. Peyton shoved him back. "No, but you do." Two more guys quickly surrounded Peyton. Gabe jumped up immediately, followed by Elias, and went to stand between Peyton and the three who seemingly wanted to pick a fight. One of the guys went to push Gabe out of the way, but Gabe quickly caught the guy by his wrist, twisted his arm, and turned him around. Not tonight, Jesse," he warned. The six guys were suddenly broken apart by two large men. Agent Dalton spoke to Gabe. "Think, Gabe. Where's Taylor?" Gabe immediately looked for her and didn't see her. Before he could panic, Agent Dalton spoke. "She's in the car, where I just put her." Lesson learned? Gabe nodded. He should have seen to her safety first. "You guys go," Agent Crawford said to Gabe and his friends. Gabe nodded and they backed away. "You aren't cops," Jesse said to the agent. "No, we're security agents, and we don't have to obey the same rules as the cops, so that makes us your worst nightmare," Agent Dalton responded. "Now you kids run along, get your ice cream, and go." One of the guys pulled a small knife. The agent shook his head. "When I take that from you, it will probably break your wrist. You want to rethink that?" The kid didn't take the warning fast enough, and Agent Dalton removed the weapon in the blink of an eye, leaving the kid grasping his hand in pain. The agent folded the knife. "Shall we call the cops?" The three who started the mess shook their heads, got in their car, and sped away. Agent Dalton turned to Gabe and Peyton. "And the night is over. Let's go." They said goodbye to Elias, Lucas, and Liam and got in the limo where Taylor and Avery were already sitting. The ride was silent for a few minutes, and then Gabe asked, "So, Agent Dalton, did you break his wrist?" The agent laughed. "No, I was very gentle." Gabe looked at Taylor, who was smiling at him. "What?" he asked. "My hero," she said. He rolled his eyes because he knew that wasn't true. "Mine, too," Peyton said in a feminine voice, making everyone laugh. They arrived back at the inn. Peyton and Avery said their goodbyes, got in Peyton's old vehicle, and drove away. Gabe knew they would have no privacy the rest of the night, and so before they went inside, he stopped Taylor, took her in his arms, and kissed her goodnight. "I had the best time I've ever had," she said softly. "I will never forget this night." He smiled. "Me too. I'll never forget it either. And sorry about that last part." "Oh, that part was fun too," she said with a laugh. He brushed his knuckles over her cheek. "You sound just like my father, and thinking about him, I guess we'd better go in." "No, you sound just like your father, and thinking about him, I guess we'd better go in." She sighed and nodded. New scene. It's May 12th, Sunday morning, Pine Forest Country in Pine Forest, Georgia. Jody entered the inn's kitchen early in the morning to find Miss Mattie sitting at the kitchen table, dabbing at her eyes. "Grams, what's wrong?" "Oh, nothing, child," the sweet woman said, shooing away Jody's concern. But Jody was a nurturer, a caregiver, a servant of God, and she knew when she was being called upon. She poured herself a cup of coffee and went to sit next to Mattie. "You're not going to get rid of me that easy, so you may as well tell me what's going on." Mattie sighed. "It's nothing, really. I had a dream early this morning. My Lawrence came to see me." Jody nodded. Lawrence was Mattie's husband, who died of a heart attack some 25 years earlier. He passed before Lisa had been able to make it home to her grandparents. "It was so real, Jody. I know it sounds crazy, but it feels like he really did come to see me." "That doesn't sound crazy," Jody said, patting her hand. "We know we continue to live after we leave this earth life. Everybody thinks they know what the rules are, but I don't know what the rules are. But I know that there have been many stories of people who are absolutely certain that they've received messages from family members." "Did he say anything to you?" She nodded. "He told me he loved me. I told him I loved him too, and that I missed him terribly, now more than ever." Jody frowned. "More now than ever? Why?" Mattie shook her head. "You know, dear, I don't even know why I said that. It was probably just a silly dream, but I do miss him. Maybe it's because I'm so old now, but I'm looking forward to being with him again." I've done so much in my life. Thanks to my sweet granddaughter, I was able to see all of my dreams come true. I've taught people to cook. I've run my own restaurant. I was able to share my life with my granddaughter and see her marry Chaz and see her have her children, see her flourish. I'm content with that. I'm very blessed. Jody nodded, trying hard to hold back the tears that were threatening. They weren't tears of sadness, but the poignant tears of a time coming to an end. She had a feeling there was a purpose for Lawrence coming to visit Maddie, and Jody suddenly knew what she was supposed to do. You know, Maddie went on, with Lena soon getting married, it won't be long before Lisa herself is a grandmother. It's strange how quickly time goes by. It's like a blink of an eye. It seems just yesterday Lisa came home to me and met her hunky cowboy, Maddie said with a sly grin, raising her shoulders up and down and making Jody giggle. And now, Maddie went on, her little baby girl is getting married. It's all so strange. It is, Jody agreed. And it seems just yesterday that you and John arrived here to help change my home into the inn and announced you were pregnant. And who would have guessed that your little baby boy would grow up to marry my great-granddaughter? It's hard to wrap your brain around, but that's the circle of life, I guess, she sighed. It is indeed, Jody whispered. She smiled at Miss Maddie, whom she always thought of as Mrs. Claus. That was probably because that's how Lisa had described her, and it just stuck. A tiny woman with white hair and an elf-like face. So sweet. She rose and put her arms around Miss Maddie from behind and squeezed. I love you, Miss Maddie. You've been like my son's only grandparent, and mine too. You've made mine and John's and Jake's lives ultimately better just for allowing us into your world. Oh, thank you, dear. I love you all too. So, so much. What's going on in here? Lisa said as she and Lena came in through the kitchen door. Are you trying to steal my grandmother? Jody grinned. It was worth a try, but she only has eyes for you. What about me? Lena asked nonchalantly. Oh, pooh, I love you all, Maddie said, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Lisa looked to Jody, who gave her an I'll tell you later look. Well, let's get this show on the road. We have a huge brunch to prepare, Lisa said. Maddie went to stand and get to work. You just relax today, Jody said. The kitchen crew has been well taught by you, and we can handle it. Why don't you go spend some time with Lena and Jake and give them words of wisdom for their upcoming nuptials? Maddie smiled. Oh, that would be such a pleasure. She held her hand out to Lena. Come on, Bugs. Go find your sweetie and indulge this old woman. Let me tell you all about my Lawrence. Lena smiled sweetly. Absolutely, Grams. You go find a seat, and I'll go find my man. New scene. They didn't attend church this morning because the Kenos had to leave soon, so instead they had their own morning prayer meeting with Ricky and John as speakers, Lizzie and her girls offering some praise songs, and Miss Maddie's kitchen staff serving a delicious brunch. Breakfast over, the inn guests were taken on a visit of the Pine Forest Gardens, a beautiful botanical park put together by the women of the Pine Forest Gardening Club. While the guests were gone, Lisa and Lena Stewart, Lizzie and her twins, Bree Keno, Jody Apple, and Miss Maddie sat at the large dining room table and tried to get in some more wedding planning before the Kenos had to leave. They decided on a June wedding at the ranch in the barn, talked about putting a rush on invitations and getting them out in the next 10 days. They went over pics of wedding gowns to narrow it down. Lena was a simple girl with simple tastes, which was much harder, believe it or not, to accommodate. Everything was too fancy, too frilly, too tight, too big, too sleek. Not country enough. It was easier for Jake, for he would be wearing his dress whites uniform and inviting his fellow military friends to do the same, including his father and Keegan, and of course the father of the bride. Colors were decided on, yellow and blue, and no pink, because it clashed with Lena's hair. Maddie was in charge of the menu. Cakes the couple would go pick out after Jake gets back from training next week. While the women planned the wedding, the men went outside to talk, and they turned chairs around at the pool and sat in a circle. Anyone looking out would think it was a somber discussion. Ricky, John, Keegan, and Chaz listened to Jake, young Eric, Jojo, and Logan as they spoke about their future plans. Charlie and Matt listened intently, or maybe just politely. It had begun by Jake asking young Eric about the movie he just filmed. New scene. Oh, Tay, don't cry, please. Gabe and Taylor had slipped away to walk down to the creek, and Taylor was making it very evident that she didn't want to leave. She sniffed. I can't help it. I can't stand being away from you. This time together, it went by too fast. I agree, it really did. But hey, listen, I graduate in 2 weeks. I'll find a way to come see you. You promise? Absolutely. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out what I'm going to do with my life. Whenever that turns out to be, I'll come see you. I hate this. She threw her arms around his neck and buried her face against his chest. He closed his eyes and breathed her in, committing the moment to memory. His life, his perspective, everything it seemed had changed over the past 2 months. He felt strange, like he was outside his own body. He felt like he wanted to go back in time to where the most pressing thing was looking forward to doing some early morning shooting, or washing the car, or cutting the grass, or teaching his baby sister to catch a ball. Everything had changed. This morning he was told that he and Taylor were trending everywhere, that they were definitely the youngest celebrity power couple, that the money in the fundraiser had almost doubled, that talk show reps were trying to reach out to them through Bree's and Ricky's and even young Eric's agents. There were agencies reaching out for endorsements, anything from sports equipment and shoes to clothing and lingerie. Earlier, Gabe and Taylor had scrolled through thousands of pics and videos. Their dance at the prom already had over 1 million views. There was a story about them dancing with the shy kids. There was speculation of all things about them getting married. It was all just too much. He needed to have a long talk with his father, and he needed to speak with Grandmaster Kino. That thought, Gabe suddenly realized, gave him much comfort. He pulled back from Taylor and lowered his head and kissed her softly, deeply. I'll come see you soon, I promise. And I just realized you guys are coming to Jake and Lena's wedding, right? I mean, that's just a little over a month away. It's actually the day after my birthday. So we'll see each other then, too. She nodded. I want to see you every day. Every single day. He blew out a breath. I don't see how I can make that happen. But you like that, right? He gave a short laugh. That would be awesome. But Tay, we have to be mature, we have to be responsible, and we have to be realistic. You're still in school, and I'm going to be 18 in June. I know that, and I hate it. He laughed. Well, sorry. Do you realize that when you turn 18, it will be illegal for us to be together, she said. We can date, just not have sex. Well, you just remember this, Gabe Tanner. You and I, we're going to have sex one day. You wait and see. His brows rose. Maybe we'd better start back to the house. She giggled. I scared you, didn't I? She ran her hands up his arms and across his chest. Big, strong, Gabriel Tanner is afraid of little old me, she said softly as she touched her fingertips to his lips. He grabbed her hand and jerked it down, shoved her down on the ground, covered her with his body, and kissed her hard. He lifted his head, a fierce look on his face. Yeah, you scare me, Taylor. You scare me because I want you so bad I think I'm going to die. I want to make love to you with every fiber of my being. He kissed her again. But I care about you, Taylor. I care enough that I won't use you like that. I won't make you feel dirty and used. And I hope you care enough about me that you would want me to keep my covenants with God. He lay there looking into her eyes. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling, and he swallowed hard and got off of her. I'm sorry. I lost it for a second. Did I hurt you? He asked as he helped her to her feet. She smiled at him. Of course not. I like it when you're intense like that. He shook his head. You're a little wildcat, you know that? My dad has said the very same thing. Well, that doesn't surprise me. And that is the end of chapter 22.